Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to do another Swedish beer, and this is a brewery who are very hard to find in Sweden these days, and I'll tell you a little bit why in a minute. But we're going to do my first beer review from Brekeriet today, who are actually quite local to me. They're based both in Djurslov and in Landskrona as well. I'm here in Lund, of course, but we're going to have a taste of the Saison from Brekeriet, and this beer was very kindly sent to me by one of my Swedish fans, Johan Röding, so a huge thank you to him for providing the beer for this one. He sent me two Untappd beers, the Yellow Belly and the Agamemnon, which are both expensive as hell and rare as hell. I was so surprised that he sent me them, but he also sent me this Brekeriet one, which of course is very difficult to find in Sweden. So a huge thank you to Johan for his very kind donations to the channel, and I hope he enjoys all three of the videos that we're going to do of his beer. So a huge thank you once again for supplying the channel. But anyway, as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you do want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual websites are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my future reviews that I can hopefully do from Brekeriet. Hopefully this kind of opens the door to do more of their beers, but there's all the usual social media things, Facebook, Twitter and Untappd, so please follow me on there. Your support will be much appreciated, and if you do want to see more beer reviews, subscribe to the channel below, and I will apologise in advance for any bad Swedish pronunciations in this video. I'm still getting used to Swedish since I moved here to Lund, and the pronunciation of course is actually one of the more difficult things when it comes to Swedish. But anyway, to tell you about Brekeriet, so these guys are based both in Djurslov, just outside of Malmö, and Landskrona, which is about halfway between Lund and Helsingborg. So the company was founded back in 2011 by the Ek brothers. That word literally means oak in Swedish actually, but the brothers are Fredrik, Christian and Andre, and this is a specialist brewery in wild beers, and they use yeast strains mainly of the Brettanomyces genus, but they were the first brewery in Sweden to do this, and they're the only specialist sour beer brewery in Sweden to date, so really quite a cool brewery in fact, and they're very highly regarded in that field, and generally of course as well. But the original brewery is based in the old brew house in Djurslov, and this was actually a share brewery for local farmers once upon a time. But they brewed their first beers in 2012, and this brewery actually had quite a modest production of 500 litres per brew, and this gave them a yearly capacity of 38,000 litres. But as of 2015 they have a new brewery in Landskrona which can produce 20 hectolitres of beer per brew, and they now have a fermentation capacity of 80 hectolitres, and apparently they produce their wild bunch beers continuously in Landskrona, and they brew their sour patch beers and the speciality one-off beers down in Djurslov. But in 2014 the brewery actually caused quite a stir because they withdrew completely from the Systembolaget system in Sweden. They cited bureaucracy issues with this nationalised system, and so they decided to focus on their exports abroad rather than selling beer locally. So you could still buy these beers in Denmark and over in America actually, but you couldn't buy them in Sweden, and it's only going to be this year 2016 that they're going to start bringing some of the beers back into Systembolaget. But if you don't know, those of you watching abroad might not know, but in Sweden there's the Systembolaget system here, and it's basically you can't buy any alcohol above 3.5% in the supermarket or anywhere else. You have to go to the nationalised beer stores called Systembolaget, and it's in a way it's good for beer tasters like me. You can order beers from all over the country, but for breweries it's not a very fair system. They only get their beers distributed to a few local stores, and they have to pay quite a lot to have them distributed to the stores that are further away. So obviously for the more northern breweries in Sweden, the very rural ones, it's actually really quite difficult to get their beers well known and for the company to really take off in that regard unless they export their beer. So it's a system that in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, and in the case of Brekeriet it didn't work out so well, so they need to figure out something to get the system a bit better. So you can read a little bit more about that. I'll put the link to the article in the video description below. It's in Swedish, but you can use the Google Chrome Translate to have a look at it for yourself and read a bit more about it. But the brewery website's in the description below, and if you want to see more about Brekeriet, do go and have a look at that. They've got quite a range of beers as well, and if you want to see those, just check out the Rate Beer page, or indeed the Untappd page as well. I'll maybe put the links for those in the description for you below too. But let's get on to the tasting of this beer. So this one is a 6.5% Saison. The commercial description for this one, I have it here. It says Brekeriet Saison is a Scanian Saison receiving its special character by fermentation using a mixture of different yeast strains, particularly those of the genus Brettanomyces. This beer is carbonated naturally by fermentation in the bottle, and therefore giving a thin layer of yeast on the bottom. So very, very nicely presented. Brekeriet, of course, are very well known with this big white bee that you can see on the label, and it's got some of the kind of trippy artwork on this one. You can see it, that's also on the bottle cap there, and the little kind of blurb thing that I read out to you there is on the side of the bottle in Swedish. You can see it has the date on here, best before 2016, the 24th of June, batch number 41. I'm not sure if that's just in general of the year or if it's particularly for this beer, but as I said, 6.5% Saison, nicely presented, and you can see the yeast in this one just at the bottom. So without further ado, let's get this beer open and we'll get on with the tasting. A huge thank you once again to Johan Reiding for sending me this beer. So, as you can see, a really nice smoky opening on that one actually, but let's get this out and into the glass. But you can really smell some of the nice fruity characters off this one. It almost smells just a little bit tropical when you open it, but if you smell it more closely, you really get that kind of tarty Brettanomyces sour character that you would expect from these beers, of course. Brettanomyces sour beers are something that I don't drink too often, but I've been finding myself getting more and more into these recently. Lover beer, of course, from Italy was my first encounter with a proper sour beer brewery, and this is my first Swedish encounter, so it should be really interesting. But as you can see, this beer is poured a nice bright orangey amber colour there. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see there is a degree of transparency to it, but it's mainly a kind of nice orangey amber opaque colour. There's a half finger, or there was a half finger of a frothy white head, but that's faded away just to be a very thin foamy layer. There's quite a bit of carbonation visible on this one, and of course when it's a bottle conditioned beer like that, you do expect that from this one. You can see one or two little bits of sediment from this floating around the bottom, but very, very small particles. Overall though, looks like a very nice beer. I'll just bring the light over and let you see the exact colour of that. You can see, if I just tip it that way, it's a really nice, bright, almost blood orange colour actually. So let's give it a smell and see how we get on then. So, without sugaring it up, it actually smells quite sweet. There's a kind of caramelly note coming out of this beer, but it smells really quite interesting. There's a nice caramel and almost biscuity note coming out of this one. If you sugar it up a little bit more, you start to get the more floral and aromatic hop from this beer. It's really, really nicely done actually. Especially when you get a beer from a brewery that are quite as well known as this, Brekeriet, you really want to try and just pick up all the things that are going on here. So you get a big bready yeasty character, as you would expect from a Saison. There's a bit of a sort of peppery spice in this one, but that's not too prominent. It's more on the sweet side of the breadiness. There's some caramel and almost biscuity notes coming out of this beer. And as you would expect, there's a little bit, there's a kind of slightly grassy hop coming out of this one. Some citrusy character as well, which is the bready sort of tart aromas coming out of this beer. You can see the head starts to regenerate if you sugar it up a bit. But yeah, it has everything you would expect of the Saison. It's actually quite a mild aroma on this one, to be honest. It's not too complex, but it has everything you would expect of the Saison. The bready yeasty character, a bit of peppery spice, the bready notes, you know, the kind of quite sharp, quite tart citrusy character. There's a bit of woody note in there as well, and some caramel coming out, maybe even biscuity notes too, but some grassy and floral hop. But it smells very, very nice. So let's get stuck into this beer. This is the Saison from Brekeriet. Apparently this beer is very good, but Johan tells me they have got some beers that are even better than this one, so I'm sure we'll find out in the future. But thank you again to Johan for sending this beer. Let's get stuck into this beer. This is the Brekeriet Saison from Djurslov and from Landskrona here in Skåne, Sweden. Skål! Oh yeah, I always find with sour beers, you really have to take a few sips of them to let your palate adjust. This one comes in really, really quite sour actually. It comes in nice and sharp, almost like a white wine actually. These sour beers always remind me of white wine in a way, of course. These sour beers, for me, are definitely an acquired taste. The first sour beer that I tried, I have to admit I didn't like it, but after trying some of the things, Lover Beer, Brewdog did one or two sour beers as well actually, and I tried those and it actually really started to grow on me, and it's a style that I do enjoy doing every so often now. And of course with Brekeriet, even Garrett Olivier, who's at the Brooklyn Brewery, he regards these guys very, very highly, so that tells you something about this brewery. But yeah, this is really nice. It's really wet on the palate, and those sharp tart flavours really stay quite prominent in this one. You just let your full palate adjust to this before you start thinking too much about the flavour in this beer. But yeah, this one, it starts off very, very acidic, but then once your palate adjusts, it just smooths out that little bit, and it really becomes more of a juicy, quite fruity beer actually. But there's a big bready, yeasty character to this one, as you would expect. It just blankets the middle of your tongue. It's actually not too big in body, if that makes sense. This beer is very light and very drinkable, but it's probably the Brettanomyces that makes it seem that way. It's very sharp and very tart, as you would expect from a kind of sour ale sort of Saison beer, but there is a good mix between the two flavours in this one. Yeah, the other flavours in this beer really are fairly subtle. Even when your palate is properly adjusted to it, the bready flavours are there. You know, the bready Saison character just blankets the middle of the tongue, but it is very light, and on top of that, the beer actually feels very, very wet, and that's these big, fruity, it's almost citric, tart characters coming out. It's almost like a bit of lemon sherbet, to be honest. In the middle of the palate, and especially in the aftertaste actually, once the kind of wetness of these tart flavours subsides a bit, that's when the other flavours of the beer really start to come out. Like I say, that kind of bready, yeasty blanket that's in there. There is just a little bit of a peppery character to it, just a little bit of spice, but overall it is very smooth. But in the aftertaste, for me, you start to taste a little bit of a kind of woody flavour. And as I said, they let a lot of their beers ferment and age in oak barrels actually, and I wonder if they've done that with this, because you can pick out just almost a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of a woody, that kind of slightly spicy woody character in this beer. Yeah, in the aftertaste you can definitely pick that up. It's quite subtle actually, but it blends quite well with these bready and yeasty characters, and just a little bit of that peppery flavour, but it's definitely there for me. There's maybe a little bit of a caramel sweetness to that as well. You can feel the sweetness building right in the middle of the tongue as these sour flavours kind of gradually subside when you're moving into the aftertaste. But yeah, there's a little bit of a grassy hop character as well. You can feel it around the edge of the tongue. There's a kind of smooth grassy hop aspect to this beer, but just before you move into the hoppy parts of the palate, that really wet and quite tart, sharp citrus, the lemon sherbet flavours I was talking about, they're really prominent in this one. They just linger on the edge of the tongue just before you reach the very edge where these smoother hoppy characters are sitting. Very, very interesting beer, this one. And you know, it is quite well balanced, and it's quite sessionable as well. Most of the flavour for me, it's got a lot of this tart character when you first take it in, but then the flavour starts to build a bit when you move into the aftertaste. So it's one of these ones you really have to let your palate adjust to it, and you have to enjoy the style, of course. The sour beers are quite that is definitely an acquired taste for me. It was something that the sour beers I didn't like when I tried them initially, but they really grew on me after a while, and this one is kind of no exception to that rule. That you really have to let your palate just get used to this style of beer, and it's quite interesting to try another one after such a long period of time. But the complexity to the flavour in here, it starts to really come through in the aftertaste. Those woody characters, a little bit of the caramel and the bready flavour all mixing after this really this quite sharp initial tart character just starts to disappear. The smooth grassiness adds a nice little tint to it as well. But overall, it's a nice sour beer. If you like the style, you will enjoy this one. And Johan, this is a good beer, don't get me wrong, but Johan tells me that the Brekeriet do many beers that are far better than this one, and this is a very good beer. So it's actually quite exciting to think that this is a very good beer, but from what Johan says, it's actually not one of their better ones. So just consider that if you try this beer. Apparently some of their other beers are better than this. But this one is really nice and very light and sessionable, so If you enjoy sour beers, you will enjoy this. But in terms of the mouthfeel on this one, I'd say it's quite light-bodied, not even pushing the mid-bodied element, if you like. The carbonation is a little bit more active in this one. That's a kind of given when it comes to sour beers, and it really helps promote that very sharp, citrusy, tart character. It's a little bit oily, this one. There's a little bit of malty sweetness to this as well, and there's a little bit of dryness from the hops at the back corners of the palate. As I said, those grassy hop flavours are actually very smooth, but there's a little bit of dryness, maybe even some floral character at the back of the palate. But overall, the main component of the mouthfeel here is that big, wet, sharp, citrusy, kind of tart flavour that you expect of this beer. But overall, this is a really, really nice beer. It's been very cool to do my first review from Brekeriet, and like I say, Johan tells me that this isn't one of their better beers. This is very, very good, and if Johan is telling me that this isn't one of their better beers, I'm really excited to see what the other ones like, and the ones that he rates very highly are like. This is a very, very good beer. If you get the chance to try it, jump at it, because Brekeriet are a very, very well regarded brewery here in Sweden. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. It's been really cool to do another Swedish brewery, especially one that is so hard to find. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. If you do get the chance, check out some Brekeriet beers. Once again, thank you to Johan for sending me this one. Let me know your own thoughts on this one in the comment section below. Do let me know what your favourite beers from this brewery are as well. I would love to get a hold of more of them, so hopefully I can do that in the near future. But thank you again for watching. Until the next one, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Go and check out my social media things. I thank you once again for watching, and you will see many more Swedish beer reviews to come, and hopefully I can return to Brekeriet. So until then, go and check out their brewery website and have a read about these guys, and hopefully we can get their beers again in Sweden soon. Slanger just now, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.